Welcome to ESI Focus. I'm your host Adam Fitch. I'm also the editor of Esports Insider. On today's episode of ESI Focus, in which we're keeping within the apparel theme for the first block of 4 episodes, I'm joined by Matt Shaw, who has a fancy title, but he is the esports lead at Puma, obviously a giant sportswear brand, which has been competing for the past 6 months or so with Adidas and Nike to really establish itself as the leading sportswear brand in the esports industry. So with Matt, we discussed a lot, and I don't want to ruin it all, but we definitely got into how Puma decided to enter the industry and why, how the brand chooses its partners, having entered deals with the likes of Cloud9 and Gen.G in recent times, and where he sees the future of performance when it comes to esports and apparel. So without any further ado, I'll get straight into the episode. Thank you very much for joining us. If you have any suggestions, whether it be new platforms or topics for future blocks of ESI Focus, then please do reach out to me. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Matt, thank you so much for joining me on ESI Focus. This batch of episodes we're discussing apparel, and it just felt right to make sure that Puma are involved in this, obviously, with the moves you're making in esports at the moment. It makes complete sense. So just thank you for taking the time to speak to us here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. It's a great roster that you have lined up, and I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
No, of course. And I kind of want to ask perhaps quite an ignorant question. It's something I could find out if I just go on LinkedIn, no doubt. But I'd rather hear it straight from yourself. So, how did you get involved with the esports side of Puma? Was it a tailor-made role and you got involved that way, or were you already involved in the company and enlightening them to esports and gaming? Kind of how did that go?
So I come from the digital marketing side. I had a lot of years in agency service. So Puma was one of my clients, actually. And it came to be that, eventually I decided I wanted to leave the agency side, and I called up my friends at Puma, and they were like, yeah, of course, we need more digital marketing expertise always. So come on aboard. So I started off in a digital marketing role. And I was about 6 months into that when our CMO came over to my desk. I sat right outside of his office. He came over to my desk and he said, hey, listen, our CEO asked me what we're doing in esports, so you go figure out what we're doing in esports. And that's sort of how things got started. Now, I was thrilled by that because I had spent the past, 5-6 years trying to convince my other clients on the digital marketing side, on the agency side, that they should get into esports or at least start paying attention to it, right? So to have someone proactively in a position of power come to me and say, hey, let's investigate this, I was thrilled. I, brought up all of my old notes. I was able to sort of hit the ground running. And sort of the rest is history there, right? It started with a 5-page deck and 5 PowerPoint slides turned into, a whole new job for me. So, it was sort of a little bit by happenstance, a little bit by coincidence, but right place, right time, I guess.
And how do you go about approaching it, right? Because obviously a giant brand in the world of sports, but there are already endemic companies within esports, right? There's I don't want to reel off a list of competitors or anything, but obviously as We Are Nations and Ultimate and stuff, already, and then there's Nike and Adidas and stuff already kind of involved, I believe, at that point as well. Maybe not Nike actually. You may be closest to when you both entered the space, but how'd you go about approaching it? Because you could just go in and just chuck tons of money at something, but as we know in esports, you have to do things the right way, or else it just won't quite land right.
No, you're 100% right, and that was one of our key sensitivities in trying to enter this market. We understood that our consumer was paying more and more attention to esports and had been, obviously gamers for a long time. So the question was, how does a brand like ours make a meaningful impact, right? And that's a really important question that we ask ourselves a lot about all of our various business endeavors, is that, we don't want to just be a brand that makes stuff for niche consumers, right? What we want to do is provide value. We want to drive culture, right? We want to do things that are meaningful to a specific set of consumers, because we believe that is the way that a brand like ours wins, right, long term. So of course we didn't want to just jump in and throw a whole ton of money at it because obviously we could do that, right? But there are a couple of bigger competitors that could do the exact same thing and have deeper pockets than us. So we lose in that situation. So what we did, we started off doing some pretty extensive research. We spent about 6 months sort of going around the world. We made stops in Korea and in Europe, and then in the U.S. obviously, in Latin America, and had conversations with consumers, right? In fact, we hired a team of anthropologists to go and talk to consumers and figure out what it was that drove them, for like what their interests were, what motivated them in gaming and in esports specifically. And we figured out that there were, a couple of key areas that a brand like ours could focus on and drive meaningful value. And the insights that we got from that research they formed the foundation of our sort of key strategic pillars that we plan on pursuing for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And you've seen some of the results of that already in the partnerships that we've made and some of the product that we're putting into market. All of the things that we're doing are motivated first by what we're hearing from consumers, and second by what we stand for as a brand, and what the kinds of impacts that we're trying to make.
And would you say the enhancement of performance is one of those key areas of expertise and interest for you when it comes to esports?
Yeah, absolutely. We are a sports brand, right? And we see esports as a sport, full stop. So of course, yes, we're going to ensure that part of the total value that we're creating for esports athletes is creating performance apparel, performance footwear, and forming partnerships with relevant IP owners to help athletes perform better, right? That's what we do across all of our business units, whether it's basketball or team sport. We're getting into handball. There are a variety of sports that we're into, but it's always our drive for performance is very important to us, right? We need to make sure that we're adding value from a technical standpoint for those athletes that want to perform at their best. So yes, absolutely, that's part of our strategic foundation going forward.
And do you think there's an element of experimenting and innovating on the esports performance side? Because unlike in sports, like many sports have been around for a long time, esports is kind of in its nascent kind of formative stage still, in my opinion. And with that as a whole, a kind of like a challenge to unlocking how to improve and increase and optimize performance in esports through the use of particular gear and what you wear, and people are dabbling their toes in how to improve that, but I don't feel like we're kind of at the pinnacle of that just yet.
Oh no, I would say we're far from it, right? If you look at the performance apparel that has been designed for esports athletes to date, what you're looking at, generally speaking, are poly tees, or effectively they're garments that were designed for other sports, right? For soccer, for we've seen baseball jerseys, we've seen hockey hoodies, we've seen a variety of different things, right? But none of them were ever created specifically for the esport athlete, right? So what we do at Puma is we take a look at the unique performance situations of each of our athletes, no matter what sport they're playing, and ask ourselves, all right, if we were to wrap a garment around this athlete as he or she is performing, what does that garment look like, right? That, as far as I can tell, and I might be wrong about this, but as far as I can tell, that hasn't been done in esports yet, right? And that's, it's so critical for us to be able to show that we understand what the esport athlete is going through, what the stresses are on their body as they're performing, what they're thinking about, what distracts them when they're performing from an apparel standpoint. We have to do all of that research in order for us to even begin to make the claim that, hey, esport athlete, we understand you. So again, we've undertaken a relatively large research project, sitting down with individual athletes, with some of our esports organization partners as well, to fully understand how athletes train, how they perform, what they're thinking about, and what we can do from an apparel standpoint to make their performance better, or at very least make them more comfortable while they're performing. So I can't talk too much about what it is that we're going to be putting in market just yet, but over the course of the next week or so, you'll see some innovations come from Puma that very much speak to the results of that research and to our standpoint as a brand as to what it is, how we want to drive value there.
That makes complete sense, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got cooked up. But so when it comes to partnering with team organizations, right, which we will get into, I kind of want to discuss those partnerships a bit. I assume more than just popularity is at play when it comes to deciding and forging such deals. Would you say that ensuring like a high standard of play and like having like the elite players is important when you look at a potential partner to work with? Because obviously, I say obviously, it may be completely wrong. I've not kind of gone into this side of performance and research, whereas you guys obviously have. But do you find that you need the highest standard of play possible to really optimize for the players, or does that level not matter? And how does that play into who you decide to partner with?
Well, I think there are different levels, right? So in terms of who we partner with, right, we focus on partnering with organizations that, do meet a certain standard of performance, but also that reflect our brand values, right? So we are very much, we want to make sure that anything that we say as a company, as a brand, any value that we choose to amplify at any given time, our partners can help us amplify, right? So the partnerships that we've signed to date, they are all very high performing organizations, certainly, but really the thing that drew us to them is their ability to help us tell the stories that we want to tell in the market, right? That reflect the values that we have, that see the world a certain way, if you want to say it that way. And that's really, really important to us. In terms of, the product that we create for each of those organizations, I would say that we take a similar approach to each organization in that we ask the organization what it is that they need, right? What their objectives are, how they, want to be perceived in the market, and ask, what are the assets that Puma has uniquely that can help them achieve those things, right? So in some cases, we'll do crossovers with some of our other Puma ambassadors in the music space or the entertainment space. If brand perception is a big key focus for our esports organizations. For those who just want to be perceived as a high performing organization, then of course we focus on our performance assets in the jerseys, the kits that we're developing, but also in some of the other product that we're giving to those clubs, and the other assets. So it really depends on the unique relationship between us and our organizations as to exactly how we activate, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. And I kind of want to get into the entrance into esports, and it was through like a split specific deal with Cloud9, right? Like what were you looking for there, where it was like, okay, we're going to partner for this split, and we're going to see how it goes. Presumably that's what was said and what was agreed upon. Like what kind of indicators were you looking for? What did you need to say, okay, this is worthwhile, us really investing into things and expanding and extending this deal and partnering with further organizations down the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we knew from the outset that, our partnership with Cloud9 would end up being a long-term one, right? I think that from a timing perspective, there were certain things that we needed to commit to that were going to take us a little bit more time to actually commit to. And we didn't want to lose the opportunity to be a part of that brand and help tell those stories at the beginning of that split, right? So we signed a short-term deal with Cloud9 that allowed us to sort of build up a working relationship and understand how each organization works, and give both of us a little bit of freedom to say, hey, this works, this doesn't. But ultimately, I think that there was, there was very little doubt in my mind that we were going to, sign a long-term deal. It was just for the sake of convenience that we signed a split-specific deal, first with their League of Legends team and then with their CS:GO team, right? That larger deal that we signed later on that year was almost inevitable, but definitely those first couple of months helped shape how that relationship, looked ultimately. But I mean, I don't want to give the impression that it was, we were dipping our toe in and testing the water, right? We were committed. It was just that our ability to commit long term just took a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So we signed a short term deal, and in the meantime.
Okay, that makes sense. And you're also partnered with Gen.G, which was announced quite recently, right? I want to ask a little bit about that, and then Order as well, like Oceanic organization. Am I correct in that?
Mm-hmm.
And then, are there any other deals in place? I think there's one more that you reminded me of on Twitter not too long ago that I've forgotten.
Yeah, there are two actually. There's XCOM EGO out of Poland, and there's Futbolist out of Turkey. And with all of those, so the Cloud9 deal was signed with our global organization. Each of the other sponsorships that we have are signed with our regional organization. So they effectively said, hey, this team is really relevant to us. We would like to sign a deal with them. We helped, from a central point of view, help them organize their contracts and figure out, how best to use the big Puma machine to satisfy that, satisfy the obligations for that partnership. So, very excited to see, interest not just at the global level, right, our CMO and our CEO, but also to have that interest reflected at the regional level is fantastic to see as well.
And just to give like a real good understanding of what that means, what's the difference between, say, Fitch Esports partners with Puma's like global entity, and then ESI, Esports Insider, partners on a regional level? Like, what's the difference there? How will things differ in those deals?
Well, it's just a matter of where product is sold effectively, right? Cloud9, our ambitions are to sell this product globally, and you'll see global availability for Cloud9 product in later this year. For each of the other organizations, the way that they work with those teams is much more on a regional level, right? We want to make sure that we're communicating to an audience that is tuned into esports, but who might not look at Cloud9 and say, hey, they're the most relevant team in my region, right? So in Poland and in Turkey and in Korea, while there's certainly certainly visibility for Cloud9, it's a known brand. There are other brands, I think, that the local teams can activate with a little bit easier and can help tell their stories a little bit better, again, depending on their regional objectives, right? I think the difference really is the scale, but also how relevant each organization is to the region and what they're trying to achieve.
And are you involved in all deals, even if it goes through like a regional basis as opposed to global? Would you like oversee everything there?
Well, so yes, yes and no. What I'll say is that there are some regional teams that have very big ambitions that need the support of our sort of global machine. And of course, our machine is here to help all of our regions. But there are some relationships that can be handled at the local level that result in, relatively simple, jerseys, tees, hoodies, that kind of thing that the global team doesn't necessarily need to get involved with, right? So while my job is to provide sort of the strategic guidance for how Puma wants to be perceived to gaming and esports consumers, and our regional teams will sort of go and execute that. So it's not as though I'm leading a global esports team. I'm simply I'm providing the strategy and the framework for our regional teams to go do what they need to do to make sure that they're achieving their objectives.
Okay, that makes sense. And so sorry if it's like an intrusive question there. I just want to get like the best understanding possible for those listening, and for myself as well. I mean, I don't want to act like I know it all, but and I kind of mentioned earlier that competition from like the sports world is also in esports. And while I'm definitely not asking you to big them up, like, do you think that there's any way of you not like Puma as a whole, I guess, not being the leading sports brand in esports? Do you see that as like a done deal, or do you think that other sports brands have a lot of potential in what they're doing, and you can tell like with Nike, for example, the partnerships it's made over the past say 6 months or so? Like, how would you kind of assess that? Do you think it's an easy competition for years and you've got it on lock, or like paying attention closely to what else is happening?
Here's what I'll say on that, right? I'm very excited that there are a number of big sort of AAA brands that are investing in this space. I think that there's from my point of view, a rising tide, so I think I'm very excited to see sort of what the level of investment that we're seeing, how that shapes the next 5 years of the industry. I think, Puma is obviously going to have a big part of, the esports and the gaming apparel space going forward. I can't speak to what other companies are doing. I'm sort of focused on the things that we can do, right, and the value that we can provide. And I'm sure that there are other companies that are doing the same. Like I say, 5 years from now, the landscape is going to be wildly different, right? And I think that it will become an unimpeachable fact that if you are a sports brand and you're not investing in the esports space, you're missing something, right? You're missing an opportunity to connect with the demographic. You're missing an opportunity to activate and show your brand values in a way that's very, very meaningful. And honestly, I mean, at 5 years from now, ignoring esports or not participating in esports is going to be sort of like, what not participating in the internet is today, right? I think that's the sort of level of growth that we're seeing from this industry, and it will be expected of all of us that we'll have a unique sort of value proposition in this space, certainly.
And fair play, but in terms of like, so in 5 years, like things will be very different. I agree, and at the moment, it's not just my opinion. I think it's kind of like a widely held opinion at this point that esports fans are quite spoiled, or they get a lot for free, depending on how you want to look at it, right? So they can watch things for free, they get all their entertainment for free, they can follow people for free, like they can enter giveaways, competitions. Like if you want to, you can be a fan of a team and never pay a single dime and get access to basically everything. And obviously, if you're in like the product business, you're looking to sell things to these people, to this demographic. Like, does that worry you at all, or have you seen like a good conversion so far? Like does that kind of dispels that perspective? Because there's been some stats put out there as to how valuable the average esports fan is compared to say like an NFL fan or a football fan, and like the disparity there is insane. Though esports is of course a younger industry.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not concerned, right? I think that, interestingly, the esports model sort of follows a freemium model where, of course, there is a huge base of fans that may never pay $1, to me or to any esports organization. And frankly, I'm okay with that, right? At the end of the day, what we are, like the product that we are providing to esports athletes and to fans is a tribal uniform, and either you want to wear it or you don't, right? And there are enough people out there, I think, that like to wear their fandom on their sleeves, and you see it, in the at the merch booths at conventions, and you see them at tournaments, right? There are enough people who really take that as part of their core identity. That I'm not worried about whether or not the vast majority of people will ever buy a Cloud9 T-shirt or a Gen G T-shirt, right? I think that the more important part for us is making sure that what we are doing is resonating with those consumers, right? What I mean by that is creating activations, creating content, creating experiences that fans can engage with, that are meaningful, that do something for them that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get from either the organization that they're following or from a brand like ours. And I'm not. What I'll say is that, yeah, you can consume content for free, right? You can even consume our experiences for free. What I want to do is make sure that those experiences are as great as they can be, so that the next time that you're in, a mall store, you're in a Foot Locker, for example, and you're looking at a wall of shoes, you see a Puma shoe, and that means something to you, right? that you're creating that kind of brand connection because we have done something that is meaningful here. So I might never sell you a Cloud9 t-shirt, but I might sell you, a Puma rider, for example, later on down the line because you have that positive brand association. Of course, it's impossible for us to track that kind of thing, but frankly speaking, we do a lot of that kind of thing, right? That's part of the reason why we are so involved with the musicians that we're involved with, for example, right? Not to sell musician branded stuff, but to create positive brand associations, to do things that are meaningful, that drive culture, right? That's what we're about. We are, of course, a product company, but at the end of the day, we're about driving culture, right? We're about doing things that are meaningful and amplifying the voices that share those values. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Of course, I want everyone to go out and buy all of the stuff that we produce because we spend a lot of time and care and effort into producing it. And it's great stuff, right? It's market leading stuff. But ultimately, what I really want is for you to think of Puma as a brand that is like you. It's for someone like you, right? And that's the most important thing to me, right? Is to convey that, we see you, we hear you, we value the same things that you do. And our apparel is one part of that, but all of the other things that we do sort of form that entire picture.
Okay, and pardon my ignorance, but have you done any of those non-apparel based activations in esports so far? If so, I'd love for you to just run us down what you did, because I'm very interested in that stuff.
Yeah, of course. So again, we're sort of new to the space, so we're figuring out exactly what those activations are, right? From a content perspective, I mean, what we've done so far is a whole lot of ads, right? We're sponsoring some of the content that Cloud9 is putting out, and we're doing small things, right? But as a brand, we have the opportunity to do things that are much bigger than that. And while I can't point to any instances where we're actively doing those kinds of things, it will be very clear in the coming months and years that exactly what it is that we're talking about, the kinds of experiences that we're looking to create there.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus there. It's just there's a lot goes on.
No, it's okay.
And my job is to literally stay on top of the entire industry. And as you can imagine, that's not the easiest thing to do sometimes. So I do miss little bits and bobs. I just thought I'd ask because, no, it's really interesting that while of course the end goal is to sell products, there's a lot that goes on there. And it might not be, we're looking for direct conversions right now. As you say, brand affinity can help you with that further down the line, and it may not be the exact the product for Cloud9, for example. If you activate through those, it might not be that product that you sell, but it could be because of that. So that makes complete sense. And in terms of so we've discussed performance, but then there's also casual wear as well. Do you have any kind of thoughts on the difference between those and how they'll be reacted to differently by the consumers and fans of these teams?
Well, I think every team that we partner with has a different perception of how they want their fans' uniform to look, right? You obviously want to make sure that the values that, or the sort of the cultural point of view that you hold as an organization is reflected in your fan base. And one of the many ways that you can do that is through the apparel that you're offering, right? And that's the way that we sort of approach this with our esports organization partners. We ask them, what is it that you stand for, right? When you look at a piece of apparel, without knowing a ton about esports, how do you want to convey the values of your organization through the apparel that your fans are wearing? And for every team, that's a little bit different, right? And we expect that, we understand that. What I'm really excited to see is that in the marketplace, you're starting to see different expressions of brand identity through apparel. There are a lot of teams that are doing it really well. I always bring up the 100 Thieves example. I think Liquid is doing a good job of it. But what we're trying to do for Cloud9, what we'll try to do for Gen G going forward, is understand, a little bit about what it is that what it is that drives those brands, right? What it is that they want to stand for, and making sure that those values are reflected in the apparel that we offer to their consumers, right? So, for example, for Cloud9, diversity and gender equality are really, really important things. So one of the first things, and those are values that we at Puma share as well. So one of the first things that we did was say, all right, we'll design, your fanware, but we're also going to design a line or a segment off a portion of this that's specifically designed for women, right? So we'll leggings, crop tops, crop hoodies, things that are on trend, on style, that if they didn't say Cloud9 would still be fashionable pieces that we think the Cloud9 fans would wear. So we put a lot of focus into that. We will continue to do that. So that's sort of one way that kind of thing is coming to life. There are a lot of other ways for us to push as well, in terms of how the brand wants to be perceived. If they want to be perceived as innovative, then of course we can go down an innovation path, even with our lifestyle stuff. If they want to be perceived as, fashion forward, then of course we keep to on-trend silhouettes. If they're really just looking for something basic, something understated, or there are certain teams that favor or that one of their real values is sustainability. We have offerings for any of those things, right? And we're able to help craft lines that again reflect the values of of the organization. So that's the approach that we take to designing lifestyle apparel as to performance apparel really is about how we can latch on to something that the organization really believes in, and a value that we share, and bring that to life in garment construction, garment design, and how we market it, certainly.
And how collaborative is the process, both lifestyle wise and performance wise, with like the partners? Because obviously, Puma is the big dog in this when it comes to apparel and merchandise and clothing, right? So surely you would take the lead on that, but then obviously you want to keep the essence of what makes the partner special and please their fans. So like, how symbiotic is that relationship when it comes to actually developing a new line?
Oh, it's hugely collaborative. In fact, it's one of the core values that we have at Puma. Our esports business is absolutely grounded on the bedrock of collaboration, right? We are a sports brand. We're very, we've been around for a very long time, right? We know what we know, but esports has not been around, in the way that it's around now. It has not been around for a long time. And certainly we as a brand have not been paying attention to it for a very long time, right? We're very clear. We don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know exactly what's going to work for the esports consumer apart from what we've gathered through research, right? And we rely a lot on esports organizations to help us understand what it is that's meaningful to them, what it is that's meaningful to their fans, what their history as a brand is, and all of the little things that make every sports organization special. We absolutely have to rely on our organization partners to help us identify those things that are truly, truly meaningful. The very first thing we do is we ask our organizations for a brief, right? We ask them to tell us, what they want to see. Now, of course, we take that brief back and we say, all right, well, what's trend relevant from like a colors perspective? What's what's going to work? What's not going to work? From a silhouette perspective, what styles are in right now, or what styles convey what it is that we want to say about this partnership and about this organization. And we go through a whole sort of design process but it starts from interpreting the brief that our organizations come to us with, right? And then from that point, we'll come back with initial ideas. We'll go back and forth, in a design process. They'll tell us what they like, what they don't like. And at the end of it, what we come to is a collection that is from a design, from a product standpoint, right, from a sportswear industry standpoint, something that's super, super solid, but also rooted in the insights that we gather from our organizations about what's meaningful to their audience and to their brand. So, absolutely 100% it's collaborative. And that goes not just for product, but also for marketing as well, right? So when we're talking about how we want to position this, the words that we want to use, the language that, the visual language that we're using to describe this product and the brand, we're very, very hands-on collaborative with our partners as well, and bringing that stuff to life. We have to be, right? We have to be, because we still have so much to learn here. And it would make very little sense for us to just think that we know everything, right? And throw, a generic sort of streetwear look onto the marketing materials that we've designed for a particular collection, when that's not the thing that's going to resonate most with that audience.
Awesome. That's great. It's a really good insight into how things are done, because I don't know, it's easy to think that, oh well they're the big brand, they know exactly what they're doing, so they take the complete lead. It's nice to know that it's a truly like collaborative and cooperative effort as such. And I want to, as we get near the end of this episode, this isn't entirely relevant to like sports brands and sportswear, but it's something I want to get your take on anyway, because I think it's interesting. And it's like luxury clothing, right? We're in the past, say, year, we've had like Armani, Louis Vuitton, and now Gucci getting into the industry. Do you think there's really a space for them? Like, as I said earlier, like there's a lot of people who enjoy and watch esports that are reluctant to spend money. Never mind, say, $1,000 on a watch or $500 on a t-shirt, for example. Like, do you think there's room for that?
Well, I think that there's probably room for all kinds of consumers here, right? Again, I don't think that the penetration of esports into all of the different sort of demographies is 100% complete yet. And I think that, again, watching some of these luxury brands, sort of start to stake their claims there, really does a ton for the industry overall. In fact, I think that you could probably manufacture that consumer to a certain degree, right? Where if you are, there are, in the sportswear industry, we would call them hype beasts, right? There are some people who will line up outside of stores at 5 o'clock in the morning or earlier to get their hands on something that's exclusive, right? That consumer exists in esports for sure, right? I'm 100% sure that the luxury consumer exists in esports for sure. But I also think that because there is a luxury sort of label attached to some of the things that we're seeing in esports, that you have the potential to draw a fan, who has maybe been somewhat curious about esports previously, more deeply into the fabric of, excuse the pun, into the fabric of the esports landscape, and that's something that's really exciting to me as well, right? And one of the reasons why I'm excited to be a non-endemic, right, is because I have this earnest belief that the thing that will put esports over the top is the association between the things that that people already are passionate about. And this sports world that is hugely vibrant, that is interactive. That, as you said, you can consume this stuff for free, right? The access to this, the amount of content that you have in esports is just is totally unparalleled in any sports industry. So, or in any sports category. So. I think that the more that brands like mine, the more that luxury brands can sort of cross-pollinate a little bit, the more we're going to start to see an influx of people from consumer areas that we might not have expected, right? So I'm excited to see how the $1,000 watch will get people interested and excited in esports, and I think ultimately everyone benefits from that.
Yeah, I have like a bit of a half jokey theory that most of the audience in esports that will lap up all of the luxury items that come out at the moment are the players themselves. Like, if you look at the Overwatch League, for example, there's a lot of really stylish players there, and they're all wearing their Balenciagas and stuff, like the shoes that lift them up 17 foot off the ground, because that's what's in at the moment, and very much hype beastie, And I kind of feel like we'll probably see the Fnatic watch on many of them when they're not representing their team, Like, if you just went out and caught them on the street, they'd be wearing something that's both esports and luxury. It seems like that kind of... It's already blending together there as well. It's just as the esports audience grows up and they get... Like, because say if it's a 13-year-old fan, they're not going to have much disposable income, but say when they get older, like 10 years on, perhaps they've got a well-paying job or they've saved up and they can afford, oh my God, I really want the new Puma Cloud9 collection, or I really want this watch by a designer and a team. Like, I think at that point, it'll be really interesting to see where things go. And it's just at the moment, so it seems at least like the audience isn't entirely that young, but there's a lot to come from the people that are that young at the moment. And in 10 years, as you say, like where the industry will be compared to where it is now, there's a lot of potential there at least. I don't want to jinx it and say it will be a lot bigger, but you'd have to imagine it will be. So I think it'll be really interesting just watching things going forward, obviously from yourselves and everybody else getting into and kind of planting their flag in the apparel side of esports.